It occurs to me right now that part of my liberal arts education at Dartmouth and later at the U of O was the translating of a essay about the Menachmi. I don't remember how you spell that, but in it, the story was, don't beat your slaves. This was in Latin and we had to translate it, and it was hundreds, if not thousands of years old. Don't beat your slaves. They will resent you and they won't perform very well. But enslave them with chains of plastic, was the word in translation, plastic, and by giving them good food, feed them well, and those chains will chain them to the table where they eat, and they will obey you. Fairly simple concept, but I was exposed to that early in my life, and I think that had something to do with how I developed as a politician. There were other things that did that, and then when I got elected and the lobbyists, the business lobbyists, tried to block my being sworn in by saying that I had told a lie when I said that my opponent had accepted an $800 campaign contribution from a conservative Republican business group, and at trial we proved that it was a Republican group. But when I got there, I was not really prepared for what I discovered, which was that there were a small army of charming business lobbyists there, taking legislators out for dinners and drinks, also offering them trips, free trips. Earl Blumenauer, our United States Congressman from my district of 18 years, who's retiring right now, he paid a fine for having accepted a trip worth, I think the Ethics Commission decided it was worth $3,000. And there is a law, even back then, that said you couldn't accept a gift that was worth more than $100. I think that was general observed in the breach more than in the enforcement, because both Jane Cease and Ron Cease, who were longtime legislators, Democrats, liberals, and Vera Katz, accepted dogs as gifts from lobbyists, and the word in the day was that they were worth about $350 when they were given to them. But the whole process of being wined and dined and curried was creepy to me. I wanted to be independent. I didn't want to be told, you need to do this because I've done that for you. And so when I first ran, I didn't go and ask for money from the banks or the utilities or any part of the business community. I did, at the end of my campaign, a couple of guys who were with unions came, and this is one of the only times in my life that somebody has come to me and offered money without my having to go and ask for it. But Keith Burbidge and a guy named, I'll think of it, he was a Republican, but he was an official with the Teamsters, who organized the workers in the canneries in Salem. L.B. Day was his name. And he was widely touted as a liberal Republican. No, we'll get down. The dog just jumped my lap. Can you look and see how far she knocked that off?
She knocked it.
Let's see, we'll get it back. There we go. Got it back. So anyway, these guys came to me and said, we want to help you. We want to get rid of Jason Bowe as the president of the Senate, and he's not friendly to unions. And So they gave me enough money to produce my one campaign mailer. I spent $3,500 or $3,600 in my first campaign, and roughly half of it came from these two unions at the end of my campaign. And that's the piece that had in it about my opponent having taken money from business and Republicans. And so when I got there being promoted by some buddies that wanted to get Jason Bowe out of power, and the dog just ran by and distracted me. But so when I got there, the lobby had heard about me, both my telling the Oregonian that I wasn't going to support Jason Bowe for Senate President. That article, by the way, was written by a man named, nope, I had it, now I've lost it. I'll dictate in another one about him. But he put it in the paper. So when I got there, immediately when you get there, the lobby starts putting on banquets. And in a way, that's one of the cleaner things they do, because it's in a group setting and not as much opportunity for a lobbyist to really bear down on somebody. I'm sure there's a lot of kind of twisting around during the cocktail hour before the dinner, but nothing probably compared to what the lobbyists do when you go out to dinner with them. And that was one of the things that I discovered early in my time in politics, is that where people say they just give people money based on their perception of the candidate's fine qualities, the truth is they twist immediately and incessantly. An example of that is my friend Blaine Whipple, who I had volunteered to help in his campaign for Congress in 1964, he'd gotten into the state Senate by 1976, and he took me to meet Jerry Pratt, the political director for Fred Myers. And we got into Jerry Pratt's office, which was not very fancy, and he didn't invite Blaine. Blaine had come with me. He didn't invite Blaine and me to sit down. He just immediately started talking, and he said, well, one of our present concerns is there's an effort being discussed to require a deposit on wine bottles like we have on beer and pop bottles and cans. And he said, now you wouldn't want us to have to recycle those smelly wine bottles, would you? This wasn't, oh, where did you grow up? And what are some of your interests? And do you have a family? None of that. It was just, how would you vote on, can we count on you to not put a deposit on those wine bottles? This really offended me. I never got to sit down and get to know the guy. There's a longer story about him that I'll mention later, but that was Jerry Pratt, my first political operative that I met when I was starting to run for the Senate. And nothing changed in my perception about how political operatives behave. They go after you right away, and they're incessant, and they pressure, and there's all kinds of sometimes subtle implied threats. So what they do is they gradually get power over the legislators, similar to training a horse or a dog. And people say, well, why don't our congressmen help us get a ban on assault weapons? Well, it's because so many of them have been taken over by lobby groups. And somebody said today to me, well, The NRA doesn't have as much money anymore. I've read that. I know that's true, but they have so indoctrinated the legislators that they're terrified to go against them, and it's partly a whole syndrome among legislators of being used to being pushed around, used to ingratiating themselves with political operatives, lobbyists, and other political operatives. And they're so used to it, they're kind of like an old shoe or something. They're just easy. Tip O'Neill, who wrote a book called A Man of the House after he retired as Speaker of the House, he says over and over in that book, you gotta go along to get along. And he was there talking about working bipartisan with Republicans, but the rest of the story is it applies to the interest groups. You've got to convince them that you're going to go along with them to get them to support you. And once you give that up, then you're kind of lost. Toward the end of the session, a large percentage of all the bills that are passed in the Oregon legislature, in the 6 full sessions I was there, and in the 7 special sessions I was there, just before the sine die, before they end the session, there's a big stampede to get bills passed. And I think maybe as much as half of the bills are passed in the last few days. They've been hung up in committee because there hasn't been enough support to push them out of the committee to the floor until the end. But at the end, people are going around saying to each other, well, we got to do this for good old Bill, using the first name of various lobbyists. And it's like, he's our friend. He wants this. We got to get it for him. And it's so sick. But that's the name of the game. That's what's going on. That's why our legislators, you're making noise, honey.
Oh, sorry.
That's why our legislators are not responsive
All right, I'll get out.
to what we want. That's why. That majorly distracted me and I think irritated her. I'm sorry about that. She's such a good person and so kind and supportive. I hate to say anything that makes her uncomfortable at all. But anyway, I'm telling now about why our democracy is stalemated, why we can't get people. And now, right now, the big story is that something like, I think I saw the number 12% of the 535 members of Congress, 435 members of the House, and 100 senators, why only like 12% of them are calling for a ceasefire when 77% of the public input polls are saying they want an immediate ceasefire. Think of the gap there between what the people want and what the government is providing. And what I've been talking about here is the reason why. It isn't just because people feel guilty that the people in the United States stood by and watched while Hitler slaughtered 6 million Jews. It isn't just because people are overwhelmed by the horrendous, horrible slaughter of 1,300 or more Jewish people in Israel on October 7th that we are now reeling with grief about. But if that were the case, by now when they've killed upwards of 20,000 Muslims, if people are going to be so upset about killing, which I am, they should be ready to do anything to stop the killing. But instead, it's going on and on. And so far, all that our government has done is sort of escalate there's requests that the Israeli army be careful, precise in their bombing, so as to minimize the death and destruction of civilians. But I don't want to get off on the Middle East entirely here. I'm just wanting to talk about how interest groups can get control. And in interest of fairness, my having been a trial lawyer and been in favor of reforms that would have made it easier to recover money, essentially against insurance companies, for people who've been injured, I was all in on that. But I have no feelings of guilt about it, because the fact that I was a trial lawyer, this was going to affect my rice bowl. But this is a major part of my life, sticking up for people who've been hurt, and I've never made any secret of that. And in addition, when legislation was being considered, I didn't make it my sole interest. I never started going around frantically asking my colleagues to support something the trial lawyers wanted. I would give information, I would try to persuade, but I never acted like the house was on fire. And I watched several legislators who did that, and I found it distasteful. One of them just died, Cliff Trow. He was a professor at Oregon State University, and not Oregon State, excuse me, Oregon State, Corvallis. When things came up regarding his school, he would just be all in and frantically supporting, to the exclusion of being interested in much of anything else. But anyway, now I'm going to turn this thing off and talk about the urban-rural divide, which is here in Oregon and all around the country, and I don't think people adequately appreciate it.